bend over this bar and indiscreetly to get some coffee around here.
What a day.
I went into Evil West with rather low expectations, mainly due to the fact that, for one, I had never even heard the slightest thing about this game, and two, well, if I went into every game I impulse purchased that just happened to have a mildly interesting enough Steam card with high expectations, I feel like I'd just exist in disappointment. But every once in a while, I'm pleasantly surprised at what I got. It's rare, but it does happen. So let's talk about Evil West and the amount of enjoyment versus the price I had to pay for it. And honestly, have you ever felt like you've overpaid for a game, even one you were so confident it would be worth every penny? If so, let me know down below. And before we begin, yes, I'm aware that 90% of games can be found for cheaper with Steam sales, but I like judging them based on what they're listed for at full price. That, or I like wasting my money for some reason. Anyway. Evil West, a game developed by Flying Hog Studios, is at its core a Wild West beat-em-up monster slayer complete with all the tropes of both genres. You get all that Wild West cowboy aesthetic with revolvers, lever guns, dynamite, characters who look and sound like they eat rocks for breakfast and wipe with goddamn sandpaper. And on the flip side, you have the monsters and more mythical aspects, in this iteration focusing on vampires, sanguinary experiments, and leech-filled abominations they so fittingly refer to as ticks. And you know what? Somehow it just works, and by all accounts I didn't think it would in the first few minutes and setup of the game. On paper, I feel like this could have become a rather goofy concept, and was fully expecting them to pull in that direction, but they went with a more serious plot point, and while I had my concerns with that approach, Evil West managed to pull it off. To get it out of the way, I don't think the story is the most utterly compelling piece of fiction ever put to practice in a video game, but in the same breath, I don't hate it, if that makes sense. It's fitting for what this game at the end of the day is trying to be. A major positive in Evil West when it comes to the story is they really don't spend a ton of time trying to justify anything as to exactly why the vampires are in the Western frontier, you know, a place with more sun than nearly anywhere else in the United States. There is a bit of history tossed in, spaced across a few scarce conversations, but the bottom line to me was the game was essentially saying, here is the situation you are facing, this is your only focus, so get to it. We aren't going to spend a lot of time trying to get you to buy into a ton of nuanced reasoning as to why this is going on. And hell, I kinda respect it. From early on in the game, you can kinda tell where the focus really is and what Evil West is really trying to be, and makes very little excuses to the contrary. Don't get me wrong, the story has its moments, specifically with its characters. Jesse and Edgar have a great dynamic as partners, facing down monsters and contracts, utterly beautiful cutscenes. Oh, and with the story's main antagonist, Felicity Diabano, which, in regards to her, as far as tropes go, yeah, when you see a vampire child dressed like a doll from the 1600s, you just know she's going to be the most twisted villain, and goddamn was I right, and it works pretty well. I found her genuinely terrifying as far as vampires go, brutal and cunning in all the right ways, and so freaking creepy, just slowly waltzing down the hall carrying a disembodied head. Jesus, she's creepy. Now, the story isn't without its flaws, one of them mainly being the story moving really fast and kinda taking hard left and rights at a moment's notice. At one moment, you are chasing down clues to this virus orchestrated by the vampires to turn humans into creatures, the next you're off looking for a wayward scientist, then running around on errands for equipment repairs, and so on and so forth. It's very clear that the story was not the true focus point of the game at times, regardless of how much they must have spent on these goddamn cutscenes. Good lord, these are crispy. When it is relevant to the direct plot, the game has a habit of just shotgunning you with plot info, and I won't lie, there were a few times you want to stop and just ask, wait, why? Run that by me again, please? But again, it doesn't seem like this was the main point of the game. While overall I would say the story is coherent enough to give some feeling of purpose, it does lack a bit of explanation at times, and every time you may just want a little bit more info, the game just brushes you off and pushes you into, well, what in my opinion is the real point and core of this game and what it wanted to be. If Devil May Cry and John Wayne had a baby, yeah, I would imagine it would look something like this. Okay, maybe not quite, that might have been an over-exaggeration, but maybe the adopted stepson who wants to be just like their papas. I have no clue where I was going with this. Anyway, the combat and gameplay of Evil West is really, at least to me, the main focus of the game, and it shows from the first arena to the final boss fight. I'm not gonna lie, I was a little thrown off at just how prominent melee was in Evil West. It's your main form of damage at most times, and on top of that, it synergizes much better with a lot of the blocking, dodging, counter mechanics than your guns and other tools do. Yet somehow punching and slamming your way through each arena just feels right, which is weird for a game set in the Old West. But the hand-to-hand combat is smooth and responsive, and the shooting is satisfyingly snappy, giving you the ability to be seamlessly switching from a total beatdown to your repeater just in the nick of time to hit that critical zone. And those are popping up at nearly every moment, even when you are already trying to manage about 100 different things at once. The combat delivers at such a level that it allows you to manage all these things without really feeling like a burden to the gameplay. From resource cooldowns to long-range attacks from enemies, counter signals, dodge timing, healing, critical opportunities, and anything else any given arena decides to throw at you at any given moment. The enemy variety is also another positive for this game in my opinion. There's not exactly a massive endless amount of different variants, but for a roughly 11-hour game, the variety it does give you feels like it fits perfectly. Each enemy has its own purpose with limited overlap, from the range-based enemy variants, one being very fast with limited health, but attacks are a lot less punishing, to fully stationary creatures hurling ticks your way, easier to shoot, but they are significantly more punishing if you don't manage the amount of ticks in one arena. Then you have your heavy variants, each doing that category of enemy a bit different, whether it be defensive or offensive, your more standard creatures that are just there to attack you, and a few reoccurring major enemies that can be quite a headache if they pop up in an already congested arena. Is there a million of each? No. And there's a handful of repeats as you go along, but for its length and style, I'd say it's a decent fit. And speaking of, let's talk about the style of Evil West. Honestly, if I had to sum it up, I would say it's a game that fully embodies that 360 PS3 energy era of gaming. Linear levels full of hack and slash beat 'em up fun with a few small puzzles tossed in to break up the loop. Now, calling them puzzles may be overkill, essentially they are push cart here and find 3 switches, but after 4 arenas in a row, it does help giving you a few minutes to look around for some bucks, maybe recharge any of your resources before landing yourself in another leech-covered ambush. And you know, that's another point in its favor, and it's something I really should mention. Evil West's difficulty in scaling is impeccably balanced to such a degree it's kind of impressive. The game can get ridiculously hard on the higher ends, but at no point does it feel unfair. And that's something I really like to pay attention to with any game, whether it be a traditional slider for difficulty or a version of New Game Plus. Sometimes you run into these games that adds unnecessary amounts of difficulty one level to another, and at a certain point it just starts to feel cheap. Here, sure, your counter window gets smaller and the attacks become far more punishing, but I really can't count a time where a death wasn't entirely my fault, whether it be neglecting an enemy, completely missing major damage windows, or really mismanaging my healing or other get-out-of-hell abilities. Every death had an answer as to why I wound up here. There was always something I could have done or some form of environmental help I could have utilized to get me out of the situation that inevitably caused my death. Even towards the end of Evil West, where these 360 era coded games can sometimes go off the rails and throw in a massive difficulty spike cause, well, it's the end of the game, I didn't really feel that here. In my honest opinion, it just felt like the game was nicely scaled end to end, with it gradually getting harder as you went, but never becoming that random spike in difficulty. And that's honestly very nice to see for a game that runs about 11 hours. And to that point, Evil West does a lot with its runtime. Honestly, I think up until the 3/4 mark, Evil West is still giving you new tools, weapons, perks, upgrades, and that is a greatly welcome concept. It keeps the combat, as repetitive as the loop could have easily been, feeling fresh and new for the longest time because you were constantly adding new methods or combos or skills, you name it. This single aspect goes so much further than I think a lot of today's publishers realize. There's nothing wrong with the game following the same formula and looping over and over and over for the entire runtime, but as long as you keep following it up with something new to execute that loop, so even if you have that repeating loop, it doesn't hurt the experience nearly at all, and it saves you from having to reinvent the wheel area to area to make it feel entirely different every time. In that situation of reinvention, you run the risk of actually screwing up at some point and changing the game too much. Just keep giving little upgrades and nuggets of change spread out through the entire game, and it will always be feeling fresh and be a wonderful experience. You know, rather than being completely capped out with everything you can get and you're not even at the 50% mark. Oh god, before I even forget and I move on from here, the areas. How much goddamn money did they spend on the visuals in this game? It is freaking gorgeous at all times, which is made even more impressive because Evil West is a very, very linear game, like to a fault, but we'll get there in a second. But you would never have known it when you first loaded in. These backdrops add such a level of scale to each area, it really sells the illusion of a massive world, which is great because, well, I would say one gripe I have with the game is just how linear it is even for a 360 era coded game. When it comes down to the main objective and overall exploration of each area as a whole, look, it may just be me being spoiled at this point, having so many games give you pretty much free reign to look around as you please, but one thing Evil West irked me with was this whole concept of telling you exactly where to go at all times. Essentially, the chain or ladder or whatever lights up directly in front of you is showing you exactly where to go to progress the mission, and even to find the secrets or extra bucks that were, I guess, supposed to be hidden and you were supposed to explore to find them. So lighting up exactly where they are is, yeah, was a bit of a buzzkill. These maps, again, are gorgeous, and I would have loved the option to just look around and find things on my own, but literally lighting a trail for the player to find even things that are quote-unquote hidden, that's an odd choice. But you know, I think I'll let it go for the most part. I wanted a bit more exploration, but the combat, the gameplay loop, and so much more about this game is more than enough for me to find all the enjoyment I need. So, was Evil West worth $49.99? You know, I think I'm gonna say yes. Will it be for everyone? Most likely not. But if you grew up in the 360 PS3 era and know the likes of Devil May Cry, God of War, Darksiders, hell, Lollipop Chainsaw, and you know the feel of those games, then yeah, I think you'd find a lot of enjoyment here in Evil West. I am by no means saying that this game is at that level of prestige, but Evil West, at least to me, doesn't set out to do all that much outside of being just a video game, and it really isn't afraid to boast that point. It's at its core a hack and slash linear game that focuses heavily on the combat, combos, and gameplay as a whole, just to be a damn good time. The story is there to add some presence, but it's not really the point they sold to me. The point they did is it's a video game, so have some fun and don't think too hard about it. And to be entirely honest with you, I miss this type of feel in games. It doesn't spend copious amounts of time trying to explain every little detail, inject some higher moral meaning or lesson to take away. There aren't big long lectures on unrelated topics shoved in your face for relevance. No, Evil West says here's a gauntlet charged with lightning, a repeater, and a pistol. Go kick some vampire ass, would ya? Okay, yes sir, I will do that. Well, that's gonna be about it from me. I started this channel making these types of videos, and honestly, I kinda miss it. It let me play a new game every week and provide my glorious opinions that no one asked me for. If you enjoyed, maybe consider liking the video and subscribing. It's free, and then you get to watch me pay full price for games that are probably not worth a dime. Could be fun. Speaking of, if you ever felt like you overpaid for a game, let me know down below. I'd love to hear it. Well, I'm gonna go find something else to play or buy, or maybe work through this backlog on a Steam library. Oh, who am I kidding? It's probably gonna be Borderlands. Anyway, see ya.